Hello everyone and welcome to this lecture. Today we're going to look at conditional sentences. In English, there are four types of conditional sentences: the zero conditional, the first conditional, the second conditional, and the third conditional. In addition, we also have mixed conditional sentences, which we are not going to cover today, but this lecture is going to be a good base for you for the continuation, because I think it's very important to be 100% confident with all these four conditional sentences before you can move on to mixed conditional sentences. So let's have a look at my examples here. I've got one example for each of the conditional sentences that we are going to look at today. For the zero conditional, I've got if you heat ice, it melts. For the first conditional, I've got if you give me your phone number, I will call you. And for the second conditional, I've got if you gave me your phone number, I would call you. And for the third conditional sentence, I've got if you had given me your phone number, I would have called you. One thing to notice about all the conditional sentences here is that they all consist of two parts. One of the parts is the if clause, as we refer to it, and the other part, it will be the result clause. What happens if the condition that we have talked about in the if clause is met? So this will be the result or the consequence of the condition being met. Another thing that we need to notice is more to do with punctuation. If you put your if clause as the second part of your conditional sentence, we do not need to use a comma. This is an important tip for you for your writing. Now, let's have a look at our zero conditional sentence. The sentence that I've got for you is if you heat ice, it melts. This sentence describes not a singular situation, it describes a situation that is met by a particular consequence. So we use the zero conditionals to talk about laws and rules in general, laws and rules of life. So every time something happens, the condition happens, automatically it will be followed by the same result without any variation. So the zero conditional sentences are used to talk about situations in general. If water reaches 100 degrees, it boils, for example. Or maybe something on a remote control. You want to talk about what happens if you press this button on a remote control. So you could say, well, if you press this button, the TV comes on. This is every time you press the button, the TV comes on. So remember this about the zero conditionals, that they are not about a particular specific situation. They are about one type of situation in general. Now, how do we form the zero conditionals? We have the if clause. Within the if clause, we use the present simple tense. And in the result clause, we also need to use a present tense. In this case, we're using present simple tense. Now, let's have a look at the first conditionals. The first conditionals talk about and describe one specific situation. They are also often referred to as real conditionals, because when we use the first conditional sentences, we give our listeners the message that we think that this situation is actually quite possible. Maybe we are not 100% certain, but we definitely think that this situation is likely and can quite easily happen. So in my example here, if you give me your phone number, I will call you. When I use this type of conditional sentence, I indicate that I think it's quite likely that you are going to give me your phone number. Maybe I have got an important exam result that I want to tell you, or maybe I want to tell you about the party and where to meet tonight. So seeing that we are friends and we know each other, I think it's quite possible that you are going to give me your phone number because you want to know the information that I am going to tell you in that phone call. So to signal this, I use the first conditional. What is the form of the first conditional? Well, again, we have the if clause. Within the if clause, we are using the present tense again, so present simple tense. However, in the result clause, we need to use the auxiliary will plus the base form of the verb. Now, let's have a look at the second conditional sentences. My example here is, if you gave me your number, I would call you. Now, this is different from our first conditional sentence. Yes, we are talking about still one specific situation, but the hidden meaning of this sentence is that I actually don't think that this situation is very likely. I am not very confident about you giving me your phone number. So think of another situation. Let's say you meet someone at a party, you don't know this person, but you want to maybe keep in touch with them. However, you think maybe they seem a bit offish with you, so you think, actually, I don't think they are going to give me their number. So to indicate that you are uncertain or that you think that this situation is unlikely, you can say, well, if you gave me your number, I would call you, to show your uncertainty. So the important difference between the first conditional and the second conditional sentences is that whereas the first conditional sentences are referred to as real conditionals, the second sentences are very usually referred to as unreal conditionals. This is the conditional that we use to talk about imaginary situations, when we want to talk about hypothetical situations, or when we want to talk about situations that we think are not likely to happen. Other classic examples for second conditional sentences would begin with things like, if I found a spider in my bag, or if I met the Queen, or if I won the lottery. So all of these situations are quite unlikely. Therefore, to indicate my belief that these situations are unlikely for me, I need to use the second conditional construction to talk about these situations. What is the form of the second conditional sentences? Well, in the if clause, as you have probably noticed, we use the past simple tense. And in the result clause, we need to use would plus the base form of the verb. So would go, would see, or would finish, and so on. Now let's have a look at the third conditional sentences. The third conditional sentences are very different in meaning when we are comparing them to the first and second conditionals. So my example here is, if you had given me your number, I would have called you. The third conditional sentences don't talk about the present. They actually describe a situation that didn't happen in the past. So they still describe hypothetical and imaginary situations like we do using the second conditional. But the only difference is that we use the third conditionals to talk about hypothetical situations in the past. So when I use the sentence, if you had given me your phone number, that actually means that you did not give me your phone number. So I want to imagine a situation in the past that didn't happen. Therefore, I'm going to say, if you had given me your phone number. The hidden meaning is that you didn't give me your number. So what is the form of the third conditional sentences? Well, in the if clause, we use the past perfect tense, which is had plus the past participle form of the verb. So had been, had seen, had finished. And in the result clause, we use would have plus the past participle form of the verb. So would have been, would have seen, would have finished, and so on. So remember that the third conditionals always talk about a past hypothetical situation, a past condition that was not met, and the result that did not happen. One common mistake that students make using conditional sentences is mixing in the will and would in the if clause. It's not possible to use would or will immediately after if. So the sentences, if you will give me your phone number, are not correct grammatically. If you would give me your number, again, this is not correct. We cannot use will or would immediately after if. Will and would can only go in the result clause. So if you give me your phone number, I will call you. Or you can swap it around and say, I will phone you if you give me your phone number. Again, notice it doesn't matter where the if clause goes. In no case can we use will or would inside the if clause. Now let's have a look at some sentences and see if you can complete the first, the second, and the third conditionals. I've got if you go to the party, and I want to use have a good time as the verb, and I would like to create a first conditional sentence here because I believe that this is very likely. So if you have said if you go to the party, you will have a good time. Well done. This is a classic first conditional sentence where we use the present simple in the if clause and will in the result clause. Now let's have a look at my second sentence. If you went to the party, you, and the verb I want to use is, again, have a good time, because I don't think you are going to go to the party. So I want to use a second conditional construction now, just to show you that I think it's unlikely that this situation is going to happen. Maybe because you have too much work to do, maybe because you're too busy, but this is my belief about this situation. So if you have said, if you went to the party, you would have a good time, well done. So here we're using the past simple in the if clause and would in the result clause. This is the second conditional to show that this situation is just an imaginary, unlikely situation. Now let's have a look at my third sentence. If you had gone to the party, I want to use the verb have a good time again. And this is now about the past. So how shall we complete this sentence? If you have said, if you had gone to the party, you would have had a good time. Well done. Extra brownie points for you. So that's all for today. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you know more about the conditional sentences. Until next time, take care, guys.